many fights that occur in Naruto that we're told about but never see. And honestly, that's a shame, because the majority of these forbidden fights, as I call them, could have the potential to be the most impressive in the entire series. Examples of these forbidden fights are things like Sakamo Hatsuki versus Granny Chiyo versus Hanzo the Salamander, or even Might Dai versus the Seven Swordsmen of the Mist. But out of all of the legendary fights that Naruto fans yearn to see but never got the chance to, there's one that reigns supreme, and that fight is Tobirama versus the Kinkaku Force. See, this fight saw the second Hokage pitted against Kinkaku, Ginkaku, and 20 high-level Jonin. That's one of the most powerful ninja of all time versus two literal descendants of Hagoromo and an entire squadron of 20 additional Jonin heaped onto that mess. And Tobirama found himself in this 1v20 because he was covering the retreat of his expedition force into the Hidden Clouds territory. That is to say that he was protecting the lives of Kagami Uchiha, Danzo, Hiruzen, Koharu, and Hamura. And 4 out of those 5 people later became village elders and massively important to the growth of Konoha as a whole. And yet, all we know about this battle is who fought in it and who won. And we may not even know that much. See, us not knowing anything about this fight is a massive shame. Probably the biggest in all of Naruto, because this fight included 3 genuine A-listers in strength, whose abilities were so massively different from each other that if they clashed together, the possibilities for how the battle could pan out are nearly limitless. Because Tobirama is, after all, probably the smartest shinobi to ever be born, and a tactical genius. To see how he would approach a battle against a substantially stronger force would have been a fantastic look into not only him as a character, but also to see how he fought. And yet all we know about this battle is that Tobirama dies as a result of it. And while we do know that Tobirama dies in this battle, we don't know if anybody else dies in this battle, as this battle could have also been the line for either Kinkaku or Ginkaku, or both of them. All we know is that by this time in the story, Kinkaku and Ginkaku were considered outcasts, because when Tobirama had previously come to the Hidden Cloud to broker peace to end the First Great Shinobi World War, Kinkaku and Ginkaku attacked him, almost killing Tobirama. And since this was seen as a traitorous action by the Hidden Cloud, as Tobirama and the Second Raikage were agreeing on peace terms in order to end the bloodiest conflict the ninja world had ever seen at this point, Kinkaku and Ginkaku were exiled from the village, at least temporarily. However, because obviously peace talks broke down with the Hokage almost dying in the Hidden Cloud village, a couple of months later, Tobirama was doing a reconnaissance mission in the Hidden Clouds territory that backfired. And once again, Tobirama ran into the Nightmare Duo. However, this time, they wouldn't just almost kill him. Now, we can possibly infer the fact that Kinkaku and Ginkaku survived this battle against Tobirama, and even went so far as to bring his body back to the Hidden Cloud. Because when Kinkaku and Ginkaku are revived in the Fourth Great Shinobi World War, shinobi from the Hidden Cloud, like Darui, Samui, and Atsui, treat them with reverence, calling them folk heroes whose stories they were told when they were young. And if Kinkaku and Ginkaku died as outcasts in a battle against Tobirama, I don't think they would be treated as folk heroes, though it's a possibility that trading their lives for the death of a Hokage could loft them up in their own village as martyrs. But it's probably safest to assume that they gained this folk hero status by killing the second Hokage and returning to the village as heroes, which means that Tobirama, supposedly one of the strongest men in history, wasn't able to complete the monstrous task of killing Kinkaku, Ginkaku, and 20 high-level Jonin simultaneously by himself. But if Tobirama, truly one of the strongest individuals in Naruto's history, wasn't up to this monstrous task, is there anybody out there who would be? Well, today, we're gonna try and answer that question, because today we're talking who from Naruto could defeat the Kinkaku Force. But before we get to talking about hypothetical Naruto battles, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you love the idea of me talking hypothetical anime fights, then you're gonna love my other channel, The Weeb Commander, where instead of talking about Naruto and Boruto, I talk all other anime and manga. And if you love the idea of me being in a real fight with somebody while talking about anime and manga, you're gonna love my anime podcast, Taku's Anonymous, where me and Danny Mata break down everything that happened in anime this week. It's available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. And if you just want to look like somebody who would fight to keep anime and manga around, go ahead and meander on over into my merch store, takusanonymous.net, where you can pick up some of the greatest anime t-shirts, sweatshirts, and sticker packs known to man. It's important before diving into the list of people who could possibly defeat the Kinkaku Force that we note both Tobirama's skills and why they didn't help him win this battle. That is to say that we need to identify the weaknesses of the Kinkaku Force and find shinobi whose strengths align with those weaknesses. See, because Tobirama, like we've already established, was one of the strongest shinobi of all time. An unparalleled genius. I have not a singular ounce of hesitancy in me when I say that Tobirama is not only the greatest Hokage of all time, but also probably the smartest shinobi of all time. Tobirama created not one, not two, but three of the most dangerous and highly powerful jutsu known to the shinobi world. All before he even became Hokage, just so he could become Hokage and outlaw 2 out of those 3 jutsus. And honestly, that was fair because Tobirama created those jutsus in an era of war so bloody that it was necessary to bend the rules of moral ninja warfare. And those jutsus that Tobirama created were 1, Edo Tensei, which is now considered a forbidden jutsu because it 1, violates the rules of natural order, that is to say it can bring the dead back to life, and 2, requires the death of somebody else to operate, as you need a dead body to attach the soul to. The second jutsu he created was the Shadow Clone Jutsu, which is considered a forbidden jutsu within the confines of a multi-Shadow Clone Jutsu because it puts the user at risk of running out of chakra, because every Shadow Clone you create has an equal share of how much chakra you have total. And thus, while using 3 to 4 Shadow Clones is fine, when you get into the regions of 100 Shadow Clones, you only leave yourself with 1% of your chakra. And since running out of chakra equals death, multi-Shadow Clone Jutsu is a forbidden jutsu because it puts the user at risk. And the third jutsu that Tobirama ever created was the Flying Raijin Jutsu, which isn't forbidden, but it's almost impossible to learn to average shinobi, and therefore forbidding it in the first place isn't all that necessary, as there's only 3 people that have ever been able to use Flying Raijin by themselves. Those people being Tobirama, Minato, and Boruto. Now, outside of these jutsus and their derived jutsus, Tobirama was also probably the second greatest water release user of all time, as his Water Dragon Bullet technique and general water release abilities are only seemingly surpassed by Kisame. But Tobirama wasn't limited to water release. In fact, Tobirama is able to use all 5 elemental releases and yin and yang, which means Tobirama was a master of all 7 releases, something that less than 10 people in the entirety of the Naruto universe can claim. So if his bag is so infinitely deep, how did he lose? Well, what it really boils down to is lack of AP and lack of Fuin Jutsu. See, while Tobirama's kit is incredibly deep, both Kinkaku and Kinkaku, as a last line of defense, are able to activate a version 2 Jinchuriki cloak that they're in control of. And if we remember anything about Jinchuriki cloaks, especially the version 2 varietal, they cover your body with boiling hot, insanely dense chakra that is almost impenetrable. I say almost impenetrable because obviously things like Sasuke's Chidori would be able to cut through it. 99.999% of things in the Naruto universe cannot cut through a version 2 Jinchuriki cloak. Even Orochimaru's Kusanagi blade, which is said to be able to slice through everything, was not only stopped by Naruto's version 2 Jinchuriki cloak in its 4-tail mode, mind you, but also the density of the chakra was so great that Naruto was able to grab the Kusanagi blade. And for those of you who don't remember just how incredibly powerful Orochimaru's Kusanagi blade is, Orochimaru's Kusanagi blade was able to damage Monkey King Enma while he was in his adamantite staff form. And adamantite is the strongest material in the Naruto universe. And while the Kusanagi blade wasn't necessarily slicing the staff in half, in fact, the staff was able to reflect the Kusanagi blade, Monkey King Enma fully admitted that if he took too many hits from the Kusanagi blade, he would be covered in bruises all over. On top of this, from an offensive perspective, version 2 Jinchuriki cloaks are able to manifest and fire tailed beast bombs. Tailed beast bombs so strong that people like Orochimaru have to summon the triple Rashomon gates, which is the strongest defensive move that one person can pull off, just to stop the explosion from hitting them. And even then, the triple Rashomon gates may not be enough. So when it really comes down to it, when dealing with somebody or 2 somebodies with version 2 Jinchuriki cloaks, you need to either A, have the firepower to overcome their defenses, like Kisame, who with the help of Samehada would be able to strip off the version 2 Jinchuriki cloak, and who also had the power to bang with a 7th gate guy. B, divert their attention away from you, like Deidara did with his C2 bomb over the hidden sand village and then attack them when they're vulnerable. C, have Amaterasu or Tsukiyomi that can allow you to either cover them in black flames or cast them into a genjutsu so lifelike that you become the god of their universe, or D, have advantageous or incredibly strong Fuin jutsu, like Wood Release, which would be advantageous in a battle against somebody with Tailed Beast Chakra, or Grand Sand Mausoleum, which is just incredibly powerful. And when it comes down to it, while Tobirama had things like mutually multiplying explosive tags in his bag, which would be able to wipe out entire squadrons of regular Jonin, explosions, no matter how many of them there are, aren't enough to punch through a version 2 Jinchuriki cloak. And even though Tobirama probably had everybody in the Kinkaku force beat in speed with his flying Raijin jutsu, unfortunately all the speed in the world doesn't help you if you can't break through the defenses of the most powerful people on the force. Not to mention, Kinkaku and Ginkaku wield 4 out of the 5 treasure tools of the Sage of Six Paths, 3 of which, when used in unison, are disgustingly broken, as the Benishago, the Kokinjo, and the Shichi Saiken, when all used together, allow the users to steal the word soul of whoever they're battling against, with little to no effort, mind you, outside of course the massive chakra drain that comes along with using these tools, but that's not really an issue to Kinkaku or Ginkaku. And once they're able to steal the word soul of their opponent is no longer able to say the word that they say more than any other word on earth. And not only can they not say the word they say most commonly, they can't say any words that contain the word they say most commonly, and they also can't stop talking. So technically, if your word soul is stolen, mine would probably be for all intents and purposes, for all because I say for and all outside of intents and purposes more often. Let's just say hypothetically my word is 4. I wouldn't be able to say 4 or B4 or 4 as in the number. And while there is technically a pretty easy and hard counter to having your word soul stolen, which is just saying a word you don't say all that often, like ant, over and over and over again, coming to that realization mid-combat against 2 of Hagoromo's literal descendants who have version 2 Jinchuriki cloaks requires a certain amount of intelligence. So one slip up and you're sealed forever. On top of this, they have the Basho-sen, which essentially allows them to create Kage level elemental release through the flick of a wrist. And while it requires an insane amount of chakra to generate this elemental release, Kinkaku and Ginkaku have a level of chakra comparable to that of Naruto. So endless. So in order to defeat Kinkaku and Ginkaku, you need to A, be aware of the fact that they have the ability to steal your word soul, B, be mobile enough to not have your word soul stolen, C, be smart enough to deduce mid-combat that if you have had your word soul taken, that you need to talk in a way that doesn't use that word for the rest of this battle, D, be strong enough or practice enough in Fuin Jutsu that you're either able to punch through a version 2 Jinchuriki cloak or seal Tailed Beast Chakra, and finally E, have enough stamina to outlast 2 individuals with some of the largest chakra pools in the entirety of the Naruto universe, simultaneously, all while fighting 20 other highly skilled Jonin. And while we're on the point of the Jonin, one of my biggest pet peeves in the Naruto community is people calling these 20 Jonin S-class ninja. This is one of the most highly accepted and highly talked about points of misinformation in the entirety of the Naruto community, because never, not once, in any canon piece of source material, is it ever stated that the 20 Jonin that are with Kinkaku and Ginkaku are S-class ninjas. That's right, it's not in the anime, it's not in the manga, and it's most definitely not in the data books. What is stated, specifically by Tobirama, who's an insane level sensor ninja, is that they're surrounded by 20 shinobi, who based off their tracking abilities are not only from the Hidden Cloud, but are also highly skilled. Not a singular time does he refer to any of these shinobi as S-class. And for those of you who don't know what an S-class shinobi is, it's a term used in the bingo book to say how strong and therefore how valuable a certain criminal is. And the only ever confirmed S-class shinobi in the bingo book are all members or former members of the Akatsuki. So everybody, when talking about this battle, usually says that Tobirama battled against Kinkaku, Ginkaku, and 20 Akatsuki level Jonin. And that just simply isn't the truth. Well, that's a really cool narrative. It's just not the truth. Because think about it for like 1 second. If the Cloud had Kinkaku, Ginkaku, and 20 Akatsuki level ninja, there wouldn't be a Konoha. 9 Akatsuki level threats almost took over the world. 1 Akatsuki level threat leveled Konoha. You genuinely believe that on top of the descendants of Hagoromo, who are pseudo Kurama Jinchuriki, that the Hidden Cloud also had 20 Akatsuki level ninja? and they weren't in charge? Not to mention the fact that all of the Jonin that were tagging along with Kinkaku and Kinkaku were also exiled from the Hidden Cloud. And that force alone, if it was 20 Akatsuki level ninjas, would be stronger than all the other ninja villages combined. The 7 swordsmen of the mist are said to be strong enough to take on entire countries by themselves. 2.5 of them are Akatsuki level threats. Now, these other Jonin were not S-class ninjas. They were high-level Jonin, so think Kurenai or Asuma, which is still an insanely tough team to go up against by yourself. So genuinely, who could do it? Well, I know some of you might be tempted to lead with an answer like Darui, and while this might be true of Raikage Darui, Kinkaku and Ginkaku's defeat in the 4th Great Shinobi World's War is inherently kind of BS. 1, Darui straight up loses and then is just saved by the plot because he has to become the 5th Raikage. Because as Darui is being absorbed into the Benishago, he says sorry to the 4th Raikage for his ignorance. Unfortunately, because Drat and sorry were 1 away from each other in terms of how many times he said it over an entire lifetime, as he's being absorbed, his word soul word switches, and thus he's not absorbed. But Ginkaku believes he is, which allows Ginkaku to get surprise feeded by Darui, who then steals the Shichisaiken and the Benishago from him, which he then summarily uses to seal Kinkaku. Mind you, Darui, prior to being on his own, was also being helped by Samui and Atsui. And then after Kinkaku is absorbed into the Benishago, Kinkaku goes kind of crazy and activates his version 2 Jinchuriki cloak, at which point he gets help from a large swath of the 4th Division and Team 10. And they have the Kohaku no Johei, which is the most broken tool in all of Naruto, period. Because all the Kohaku no Johei requires for somebody to be sealed by it is for the user to ask that person a question and for the person that they want to seal to acknowledge that question. Literally, all they have to go is go Kinkaku, question mark, and if Kinkaku goes yes, sealed. This fight for Kinkaku and Ginkaku, in my mind at least, is not scalable, at least in any accurate sense of the word. And thus, objectively, if you want to talk about how powerful the Kinkaku force was when it battled against Tobirama, I think you just genuinely have to take the abilities of Kinkaku, Ginkaku, and 20 high-level Jonin into account. So with that in mind, let's get the obvious answers out of the way. Sasuke, Sakura, Naruto, DMS Kakashi, every Otsutsuki ever, Hagoromo, Hashirama, Obito, Nagato, and Madara all win. And yes, adult Sakura could win against the Kinkaku force. She has literally already won a very comparable fight in her light novel Sakura Hiden, which takes place just a couple of years after the conclusion of the 4th Great Shinobi World War, so it's not even adult Sakura. And in this light novel, Sakura takes on multiple Anbu members who have version 1 Kurama cloaks. And while they're not descendants of Hagoromo, and while they're not using version 2 Jinchuriki cloaks, Sakura is faster than anybody in the Kinkaku force, as she is the only person outside of DMS Kakashi who actually landed a hit on Kaguya. Not to mention she also, through the power of her strength of 100 seal, has comparable chakra reserves to both Kinkaku and Ginkaku. She has Lady Katsuyo and mitotic regeneration as an almost infinite healing source, and the strength of 100 seal allowed for Tsunade, who is weaker than adult Sakura, mind you, because when I say we did not get prime Tsunade in the 4th Great Shinobi World War, and yet she was still able, through the strength of 100 seal, to crack Madara's Susanoo ribcage with a kick, something that a KCM-1 Big Ball Rasengan from Naruto could not accomplish. Thus, Sakura, who is more powerful than that version of Tsunade, should be able to punch straight through a Susanoo ribcage, and if she can punch through a Susanoo ribcage, especially one used by Madara, she can injure somebody who's hiding behind a level 2 Jinchuriki cloak. Not to mention her chakra control is literally so precise she can cut ninjutsu in half, so there's a fair chance she could just literally slice through a Jinchuriki cloak. And that isn't even the entirety of her kit, by like a long shot. So whether you like it or not, Sakura clears the Kinkaku force, and probably Tobirama. On top of that, pretty much every single version of Obito clears this fight, as he has half a white Zetsu body, which gives him Hashirama's healing factor, chakra reserves, and wood release in a rudimentary sense. On top of this, he at least at one point had a Sharingan that had a Genjutsu ability comparable to Kodo Matsukame that he used on Yagra to control him to be a maniacal, bloodthirsty monster as a leader to the Hidden Mist for years. And Kamui is a sure hit kill on anybody who doesn't have space-time ninjutsu, so long as you can grab them, bring them to the Kamui dimension, and then dip out, which we know that Obito can do. He's Kamui'd other people multiple times. And since both Kinkaku and Ginkaku don't have space-time ninjutsu, this is a legitimate option against them. Not to mention there's no guarantee that the Kokinjo would even be able to grab his word soul, as there's a possibility that the Kokinjo would just phase through him as he phased that part of his body away. We're not entirely sure as to whether or not the Kamui moves your soul. And this is just talking about Orange Mask Obito. If you go so far as to involve White Mask Obito into the equation, all the sealing and absorption abilities of the Rinnegan, plus the possibility of 6 paths of pain, make this just an even easier fight for Obito. So while I don't genuinely believe that Rage Child Obito or even Yellow Mask Obito wins this battle, I believe that any iteration of Orange Mask Obito or Tobi, White Mask Obito, and Jubito clear it pretty easily. And if White Mask Obito clears the challenge because of his 1 Rinnegan, then Nagato clears the challenge because of his 2, even though having additional Rinnegan actually doesn't confer much of an advantage. But the 6 Paths of Pain with their summonings, chakra absorption abilities, and King of Hell pretty easily clear Kinkaku and Kinkaku. I mean, Nagato went toe-to-toe with the entirety of Konoha. I like his chances here. And if non-White Mask Obito's chances are bolstered by the fact that he has Hashirama's cells, and therefore Hashirama's healing factor chakra and a rudimentary version of his wood release, then it's only reasonable to assume that the guy he stole all that from would stand a fairly good chance in this battle. I mean, Hashirama was able to defeat Kurama, not small slivers of Kurama's chakra being used by guys who gnawed on Kurama's stomach lining. Kurama, who was wearing a Susanoo, being controlled by the antagonist of the story. See, because the difference in Hashirama and Tobirama's strength is greater than a lot of people realize. Well, obviously Hashirama and Tobirama were incredibly talented Senju ninja. Hashirama was the reincarnation of Ashura, and therefore was able to tap into a lot of his powers. And while I assume that if Hashirama wasn't the reincarnation of Asura, that he probably would have ended up being roughly as strong as Tobirama, being the reincarnation of God makes you at least 3 to 5 times stronger. And the gap in that power only gets larger when we're talking about them battling against somebody with tailed beast chakra, which wood release naturally suppresses. I mean, a heavily non-prime Hashirama in the 4th Great Shinobi World War held down the 10 tails. He eats Kinkaku and Ginkaku for breakfast. But enough about the surefire answers, let's talk about some less sure answers. And in that categorization, I have Might Guy, Minato, Itachi, Prime Hiruzen, Kisame, Jiraiya, and Orochimaru. See, I believe that Might Guy has the firepower to either take on Kinkaku or Kinkaku, even without opening up to the 8th gate. See, Might Guy has proven, standing side by side with Rock Lee, that by simply opening up to the 6th gate, that the two of them were able to absolutely run the fade of a version 2 4-tailed version of Naruto's Jin Cloak. And while this isn't technically canon, it's genuinely the only reference point I have for Might Guy battling against a tailed beast that isn't Jubidara. And thus by assuming that Might Guy, by opening up to the 7th gate, would be able to defeat a singular user of a version 2 Jinchuriki Cloak, I feel like isn't crazy. Now, Might Guy did have to open up to the 6th gate to defeat a 30% Kisame, but it's important to note that when you say a 30% Kisame, we're not saying Kisame at 30% strength. We're saying Kisame at 100% strength with 30% of his chakra. And Might Guy did have to open up to the 7th gate to defeat Kisame without Samehada. But the 8th gate does make Might Guy 100 times stronger, and did make him strong enough or heavy enough to bend space-time. So I have no doubt that the 7th gate would be enough to clean up 20 high-level Jonin and possibly either Kinkaku or Kinkaku. I do believe that in order to truly defeat the two of them simultaneously, all while avoiding the usage of their treasured tools, Might Guy would need to use the 8th gate, and therefore it's not necessarily a victory, but everybody dies, so I guess it's good enough. Now, Kisame is a different thing entirely. With Samehada in tow, so long as Kisame was able to open a wound on either Kinkaku or Ginkaku, or was just close enough that he was able to get Samehada in contact with their chakra, Samehada would be able to leech the chakra of both of them simultaneously, which would allow for Kisame to stay in the fight as long as they still had chakra, which is a big plus for him, because all of the chakra that Samehada absorbs feeds into Kisame as well. And considering the fact that Samehada was able to leech chakra from Killer B at a rate which he, a perfect Jinchuriki, was concerned about, that means to me that Samehada could rather easily deplete the version 2 Jinchuriki cloak that either Kinkaku or Ginkaku put on. And while leeching all of Kinkaku and Ginkaku's chakra from their massive chakra reserves might be a bit of a stretch, it's important to note that the tailed beast chakra that they have is only a sliver of what somebody like Naruto or even Killer B has. Now, the only real issue for Kisame in this fight is that he doesn't necessarily have the speed to avoid the usage of the treasured tools, and thus if Kisame found himself in this battle, he would probably have his word soul stolen, and thus he would probably have to be smart enough to not say Itachi or any variant of it. Because let's be real, That's his most said word. And thus, genuinely, I believe, so long as Kisame is able to fight this fight without being sealed in the Benishago, that it would be able to strip them of their version 2 Jinchuriki cloaks, and at which point he would be able to kill them. I mean, mind you, Kisame is called the Tailless-Tailed Beast, and killing Jinchuriki is kind of his job. So all in all, I think he stands a 70% chance of survival. And this is corroborated by the fact that a nerfed Orochimaru, he didn't have the usage of his arms, really, went toe-to-toe with Naruto in his version 2 Four Tails mode. And thus I think a full-powered Orochimaru, especially one who has access to the Edo Tensei he had in the 4th Great Shinobi World War, wins with a relatively meager amount of difficulty, as all Orochimaru would really need to do is summon Hashirama, and maybe Tobirama, so he can get revenge. And thus I give Orochimaru, if you're talking about the 4th Great Shinobi World War version of him, a 95% chance of success. Ironically, I would give Orochimaru less of a chance of winning this battle if there wasn't 20 Jonin he could kill and then use as conduits for Edo Tensei. Like, if it was just Orochimaru versus Kinkaku and Ginkaku, they would have a worse chance at victory. But what about the other legendary Sannin in this category? Jiraiya. See, Jiraiya is no stranger to unbalanced battles, as Jiraiya was able to defeat 4 out of the 6 Paths of Pain with no prior knowledge on how their abilities worked. And we already established that Nagato, and therefore by extension the 6 Paths of Pain, clear this challenge with next to no difficulty. However, Jiraiya unfortunately falls into a similar camp as Tobirama. Huge chakra reserves, bolstered by Sage Mode, great speed, and fairly decent attack power. I'd say the strongest attack that Jiraiya has is his Big Ball Rasengan. But if Jiraiya wants to win this battle and truly punch through a version 2 Jinchuriki cloak, something that we've already established he can't do, as we already know that a version 2 Jinchuriki cloak from Naruto almost killed Jiraiya, and the only way he was able to stop the rampage was sealing tags, which I guess he may or may not have. But really, when it boils down to it, the only way that I see Jiraiya winning this battle against Kinkaku and Kinkaku is either catching one or both of them in the Toad stomach and trapping them there, or 2, trapping the both of them in the demonic Toad confrontation chant, which would be tough because both Mom and Pa have to warm up their voices to use this sound-based genjutsu in the first place, and thus Jiraiya would need to avoid the onslaught of 20 shinobi simultaneously long enough that Mom and Pa were able to sing this song to them. And thus I give Jiraiya about a 35% chance of passing this trial. But what about Jiraiya's student? Minato. Well, Minato's actually a really interesting ask, because Minato essentially has Tobirama's kit, with the addition of Sage Mode and the Rasengan, but with the substitution of Edo Tensei. And while Tobirama never used Edo Tensei in the way that Kabuto or Orochimaru use it, that is to say, to use Edo Tensei to bring back the strongest ninja of all time, and therefore Tobirama didn't use Edo Tensei as well as Kabuto or Orochimaru, him being able to use it is a massive plus in any battle. And thus this puts Minato in a somewhat odd position. See, Minato has a massive chakra pool, one of the biggest in the entirety of Naruto's history, Flying Raijin and the Rasengan. But is that enough to clear the Kinkaku force? Maybe. As we've already seen, Minato has the ability to teleport Tailed Beast bombs away from certain locations, as Minato is able to teleport a Tailed Beast bomb fired by Kurama away from Konoha. And we know from his one-shot that he was able to defeat a version of Kurama inside of Kushina, comparable to how Naruto, after learning Sage Mode, was able to defeat a version of Kurama inside of himself, meaning that Minato could be roughly scaled to Kurama in terms of AP. Tie that into the fact that he is definitely too fast to have his word soul taken. I mean, he literally hit a Kamui user, one of the only people in history to ever pull that feat off, and he holds the highest ever score on the Shinobi exam, meaning he's one of the smartest Shinobi of all time, and I think his intellects mixed with his high-level Rasengan give him a fairly good shot at winning this fight. Also, he's used to 1v-manys, as in the 3rd Great Shinobi World War, he cut down 50 Jonin from the Hidden Stone by himself. Tie that into the possible use of the Reaper Death Seal, and while that isn't technically a victory, it's good enough, and thus I would give Minato a roughly 80% chance of success in a battle against the Kinkaku force. But what about the guy who trained Jiraiya's teacher, Hiruzen, or more specifically, Prime Hiruzen? But see, Prime Hiruzen is tough, because for all intents and purposes, Prime Hiruzen was supposed to be the person battling against the Kinkaku force in the first place, and in the moment that Hiruzen volunteers himself to be the decoy to make sure that everybody else can get away, he even goes so far as to say, while it may not look like it, I'm better than all of you. Going even further to say that he would win in this battle against 20 shinobi and 2 descendants of Hagoromo. And while he could have just been trying to assuage everybody's worries about his upcoming death, we know so little about what his prime looked like, he could have been speaking the truth. Because here's the thing, he would have had Monkey King Enma, he would have been faster, he would have been stronger, he would have had more chakra, and therefore his ninjutsu would have been more powerful. And if we take his feats against Orochimaru and scale those even higher, and considering the fact that those feats were a 70-year-old man battling against Orochimaru and let's say a 30% best power Hashirama and Tobirama simultaneously, we can probably say for how powerful Hiruzen was at that moment in his life, his battle against Orochimaru was probably of a comparable difficulty level than if he was in his prime, battling against the Kinkaku force. The issue with throwing a prime Hiruzen into this battle is that he kind of falls into the same camp as Tobirama. That is to say that he doesn't necessarily have the AP to punch through a version 2 Jinchuriki cloak. At least not from anything we've seen from him, but once again, we've never seen him in his prime. But I have not a singular ounce of hesitancy in me when I say that a prime Hiruzen should be able to take on 20 high-level shinobi. As Hiruzen in the beginning of Naruto was referred to as the strongest shinobi of all time, the literal god of shinobi. But when it boils down to it, I believe that Hiruzen's only path to victory in a battle against Kinkaku and Kinkaku would be through the medium of a Reaper Death Seal, which a prime Hiruzen might not have actually known. See, because while obviously the Uzumaki were a part of Konoha from its very founding, and that's when Hiruzen was born, we're not entirely sure if he learned the Reaper Death Seal from the Uzumaki in the village, or just from their presence, or from textbooks in Konoha, or if he learned of the Reaper Death Seal from Minato using it in his battle against Kurama. But regardless, I'm gonna say that I feel fairly certain that Prime Hiruzen could draw the Kinkaku force through the usage of the Reaper Death Seal. But enough about that old bat. What about the person who was upset that the next person we're gonna talk about killed their entire clan because Hiruzen's underling Danzo convinced— we're talking about Itachi. I didn't really have a good segue there. Now I'm gonna be very for real right now and say something that'll probably garner a couple of hate comments on this video. I don't think Itachi's got a great chance here. He's fast. Yeah, one of the fastest in the show. He's also one of the smartest and most tactical shinobi in the entire universe, holding on to the second highest ever score on the shinobi exam. And Kinkaku and Kinkaku are not perfect Jinchuriki, which means that they're as vulnerable to Genjutsu as everybody else. But when it comes down to it, if you're asking me if Itachi, the man with some of the lowest chakra levels in the entirety of the Naruto universe, could battle against 20 Asuma level threats and Kinkaku and Kinkaku, who would need to be taken down with either Amaterasu, Tsukiyomi, or the Totsuka blade, I'm gonna say no. I don't think he has a battery large enough to figure that out. And while sure, from the beginning of his fight, he could activate his Susanoo and equip his Totsuka blade and his Yada Mirror, just get to swinging and cut down the 20 Jonin and possibly nick Kinkaku and Kinkaku so that everybody gets sealed into the realm of drunken dreams. Kinkaku and Kinkaku can fire tailed beast bombs, and the Yada Mirror, if it even can deflect a tailed beast bomb, can only protect one side of the Susanoo at a time. And Itachi Susanoo is not a complete Susanoo, so it's not that mobile. And so while I don't think it's impossible for Itachi to win this battle, Yagura almost killed him, and Yagura is just one perfect Jinchuriki. Itachi isn't able to use Amaterasu or Tsukiyomi or his Susanoo multiple times in one day, let alone multiple times in a couple of hours. And when faced with the threat of two separate Jinchuriki, he would have to use his MS abilities at least twice. So all in all, I give Itachi about a 20% chance of winning this battle alone. Itachi is insanely powerful, but more in a 1v1 capacity than in a 1v-many capacity. Oh, I just realized I forgot some people. Killer Bee with or without Samehada stands a very good chance, as Killer Bee showed in his complete transformation mode that he was able to go toe-to-toe with the Ten Tails in terms of AP, being able to shove a tailed beast ball back down the Ten Tails' throat with a tailed beast ball of his own. But admittedly, he was also downright embarrassed by Edo Nagato, though Edo Nagato was the strongest version of Nagato we ever saw. And while we're talking about the Hidden Cloud, I don't necessarily know why they would be battling against Kinkaku and Kinkaku. The third and fourth Raikage also stand a very good chance, as they both scale to at least Gyuki, as the third Raikage was able to fight Gyuki to a standstill, and the fourth Raikage should be about as strong as the third Raikage. And their Hell Stab, especially in its one finger conformation, can cut through tailed beasts like Gyuki. And therefore, if it can cut through a tailed beast, it can cut through a tailed beast version 2 cloak. Not to mention the third and fourth Raikage with their lightning cloaks should be some of the fastest people in the universe. Much faster than Kinkaku or Kinkaku have never shown to be able to use that ability. Not to mention that anybody coming from the Hidden Cloud would also be aware of Kinkaku and Kinkaku's abilities. So I would say that Killer Bee, the third and fourth Raikage all have about an 80% chance of victory against Kinkaku and Kinkaku, which makes sense if you think about it. They all are tied to the Raikage clan in some way or another. And since the Raikage is supposed to be the most powerful person in the village, and Kinkaku and Kinkaku were never the Raikage, any and all Raikage should stand a good chance against them. Now let's talk about some people who could feasibly make it out of this confrontation alive, but their chances are so slim, it's not really worth talking about. That list would include people like Tsunade, Hokage Kakashi, and Yamato. All three of these people have a legitimate path to victory, but that path is so narrow and so winding that it's basically not worth talking about. And with that, that's basically everybody. All the people that would stand a chance against the Kinkaku force that Tobirama failed to. But I'm curious to hear from you guys. Is there anybody who didn't make this list who you believe stands a chance? Or is there anybody on this list who you believe doesn't deserve to be on it? Tell me in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. This video is a long and roundabout way of saying that there's more people than you realize that are stronger than Tobirama.